Hello and welcome to Low Volume. Welcome to a special edition episode of Low Volume. Actually, we've returned from Computex. We're ready to tell all about all the things we saw, people we had conversations with, things we did. Maybe not all the things we did, but needless to say, we're super excited to be able to finally have a podcast episode to actually sit down and go through a lot of this stuff. As I'm sure many of our readers have noticed, we've continued to publish out content. There was just so much for us to cover that there was no way we were going to get it all out while we were on the ground. And so this episode is really going to be kind of a neat, interesting, insightful hour or two or 12, where we're just going to just 12. Sort of sit down and 12 hours roughly. Who knows? You know, we'll see where the conversation takes us, John. We'll see what happens. You don't really need sleep, John, do you?
Yes, I do.
You got plenty of that while we were at Computex, right, John?
Nope.
Anyway, before we get too goofy, we only just started. This episode, of course, we have all the three J's in attendance. That includes myself, Joshua Ramirez. It also includes John. John, how are you?
Still haven't caught up on sleep, even though apparently that's not a thing.
Well, it's not a thing anymore. We will
Yes.
persevere. And then, of course, last but not least, we are joined by James. James, how are you?
Doing good. I'm still kind of like halfway on like Taipei time, so I wake up at like 4. So I didn't have to wake up early this time, daylight savings and stuff, and then all that weirdness. But then I woke up at about 3, so it's like, oh, whatever. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about again all this cool stuff we saw at Computex.
Woo! I think we're all pretty excited. There was a lot to discuss. So, for those not attending in the pre-show and also witnessing some of our continued technical challenges, hashtag damn it. We're good though now. We're good. But we were actually struggling a bit to think of the appropriate way to talk about Computex, and that really comes down to the fact that we were really overwhelmed with all the information that was there, all the things to learn, all the people to talk to, and it really just came down to us splintering off into groups and independently going and having these conversations just so that we could have adequate coverage of all the things we wanted to make sure we saw. And so a consequence of that is that now we're sitting here and it's hard for us to even remember necessarily when we had certain conversations or saw certain things with certain companies. So talking about it from like a let's do day 1, let's do day 2 point of view just doesn't really work. Nor does it work to just say, well, we'll talk about things in the order that we saw them.
It's all a blur.
It's all a blur, yeah.
Very much so.
So that being said, all of us independently certainly have plenty of things that are quick for us to pull up that are still sort of sticky and stuck in our minds that really stood out to us as we were going through the course of the conference. So what we've elected to do is the format we're going to elect to use here is to basically just go, to each J, to each one of us, and we'll just sort of spout out, here are all the things that were really interesting to me or that I really want to talk about. And then the other J's in our little circle here can then just, add their commentary, and we'll have a nice conversation. So we'll see where that takes us. I figure we'll go in alphabetical order, as we are wont to do. So James, that starts us off with you.
Woohoo,
what did you like? What did you like about Computex?
Yeah, lots of cool products. I think even more so than the products, though, I think my favorite part by far was meeting people. So we got to meet all sorts of interesting, both marketing reps, product managers, even the owners of some of the companies. Is just really, 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 really exciting. Just meeting all these people, because a lot of them, it's like there were several of them. They're people that I've seen interviews with. I've talked to them over email, or I've just read about them, and so being able to meet them in person was just super cool. So we got to meet Tony O, the marketing manager of SilverStone. We got to meet, was it Steve or Steven Chen? I guess he's the owner or at least one really high up at Cryorig. We got to meet Jacob Dillinger, who's the I forget his title, but I think he's the marketing guy for Noctua. Just all sorts of cool people. Mr. Chen from ASRock, who's the kind of the brains behind the Micro-STX. Super, super exciting guy to talk to. Super fun to talk to. So yeah, just meeting all the people was definitely by far my favorite thing. As far as like actual products and stuff, I can't decide. It's either the SilverStone, the NJ450-SXL, the 450 watt fanless SFX-L power supply, or the ASRock X299E-ITX, the mini ITX, not Micro-ATX, mini ITX X299 with a square ILM socket, which is amazing. So yeah, those two are definitely my favorite. I really can't decide between the both of them. So I'll just say the two of them together are by far my favorite thing I saw.
You'll be buying both of them.
Yes, for sure. I'll be getting review samples of both, but I'll also be buying both. So don't have weird company property issue things. So
Ethics.
I will have two of each.
I'll take 10.
Yeah.
But
Which
yeah,
happened to be
really,
my
it's
quote at the
just like,
conference.
oh yeah. But yeah, like the SilverStone one was cool. It was especially cool because it's a cool product, but it's also cool just the way it happened. Because like we rolled up to the SilverStone booth, and I guess we can just talk about it. Because like I had scheduled the meeting first thing of the first day, same as CES. And we intend, because we scheduled the meeting at 10, the floor opened at 9:30. We intended to kind of just like find out where the booth is because we weren't 100% sure, and then just kind of wander around nearby and then go to the booth at 10. And then we get there. I was like, oh, okay, here's the SilverStone booth. And then we see this case at the front of the booth. And it's like, oh, what's this? This looks interesting. And so we ended up just like staring there, just like looking at it. And then I think it was Michael, one of the other SilverStone marketing guys, comes over and talks to us. And he's like, oh, yeah, you guys are here for a meeting later, aren't you? And he gets Tony. So we just get stuck there for like an hour and a half, or no, 2.5 hours.
2.5.
So yeah, like the SFX-L actually, yeah, we'll come back to the PIO case. But the SFX-L fanless unit, like it's like about like what, like an hour and a half. Like we're kind of like talked about everything there was really to talk about that was SFF related. And then like Tony was there, and then also I had been talking, well, kind of through Tony. He didn't. Well, he spoke pretty good English, but I guess he wasn't real confident in it because he didn't speak it too much. But the PSU product manager at SilverStone. And then like about an hour and a half after we've been in the booth and we're kind of wrapping up, he hands Tony this like little black box. And it's like, oh, what's this? And so it turned out it had just arrived like fresh off a flight from China from the Enhanced factory. But it was a prototype of a fanless, like, so no fan, like completely passively cooled, 450 watt SFX-L unit. Just like blew my mind. Because like,
I wish we'd captured the look on your face when that came out.
oh, I know. But I mean, like, this is something that was basically inevitable. I mean, if you can do 800 watt titanium in SFX-L, I mean, it's pretty easy to extrapolate. Oh, like we could get like a 3-4-ish 100 watt fanless unit. I mean, I've actually asked Tony about like if that would happen. I think I first asked him I believe it's been more than a year. I think I asked him when I was clarifying some stuff about Computex or CES last year. So it's been a while. But even then I wasn't really expecting it for like another 2 or 3 years. So like for it to just like, oh, here's a prototype, and like it's probably going to release like sometime next year. It's like, oh, this is amazing. I want it now. Can I buy it off of you? But it looks amazing though, because like a lot of the fanless power supplies basically are just like cheese graters. They're just like completely vented everywhere, and they just look ugly. But this one is just like it's got the front and back are just like your steel frame, so that's kind of like what you'd expect. And you got like, it's fully modular, so you got your modular connectors. And then on the prototype, it's like a solid back with just like the power switch and then the C14 connect or inlet for the power cord. But they said they'll probably have to vent it in the end because they just need the extra ventilation. But the top, the bottom, and the sides are just extruded aluminum, anodized aluminum heatsink. The prototype was in black because it's part of the Nightjar line. The Nightjar is like SilverStone's fanless PSU line, which are traditionally silver, so it'll probably be silver. But it looks like just completely dope. It just looks so amazing, just anodized aluminum.
Yeah.
And like from talking with Tony, it's really interesting. So like the reason it's like that, it's not just a cheese grater that's like completely vented like all the other fanless power supplies you see, like ATX power supplies, I should say, is they took the same platform like as the SX500 LTI, the titanium rated 800 watt, and then they like split it up into 4 different sections. And then each PCB is then mounted to one of the one of the sides. So each section has its own heatsink basically. But then all the sides are all interconnected. So it's like one big heatsink. So it's really, really cool. And the other thing is like, so it's a 450 watt. I think they've decided on it because like when I was talking to Enhance, and then I think Tony mentioned it as well, they're aiming, or at least Enhance is aiming for 500 watt, but they're not sure if they'll be able to hit it. So I guess kind of to hedge their bets, like Silverstone's just going to do it at 450 watt. And I guess if it can do 500, it'll just be extra overhead, just for safety. Probably gold rated, or no, probably platinum rated, because it's based on the titanium rated unit, but it probably won't hit titanium efficiency because it's going to be running at much higher temperatures, which will kind of hurt efficiency. So it'll probably be platinum rated only. Otherwise, like he said that like probably do the sample variant, some of them may actually hit titanium, but like you wouldn't want to sell it as a titanium rated unit and have to throw away half of them because they don't quite reach it. So they're just going to have it platinum rated, but it'll be on the verge of titanium since it's based on the SX500 LTI. And then, yeah, fully modular. It has a USB port for monitoring, which I thought was really cool, but they're not sure if it's going to make it to production because Tony is kind of worried that like people will buy the power supply and it's fanless and it's 450 watts in SFX-L. So it's going to be kind of hot on the inside. And he's worried that like people will like do the monitoring and load up the software. And it's like, oh, wow, this thing is hot. And like, well, that's normal. Like it's supposed to be that hot, but then like they won't realize it and send it back. And then also like it may delay production. Just kind of troubleshooting it and tweaking it and calibrating it may just take too long. And he wants to release it sooner rather than later. But actually, like, what do you guys think of the USB thing? Like I think it's like super, super cool, and I would just love to have it. But like, would either of you like care if it's there or not? Like the USB monitoring?
Nah, not really.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'm just okay. Yeah.
You are the power supply.
I think
geek.
it's the coolest thing ever, but I guess I can kind of see his point. Like maybe not everybody wants it. But yeah. So that one probably next year. Like Enhance is thinking they can do it, and then I asked Tony later, Q4, but. It's probably going to be next year, just realistically, just because nothing ever goes according to plan. So, yeah, so that's that, and then, yeah, it's amazing. I want it so bad, but I don't want to, because I sat there and talked to Tony about it for an hour after it showed up. So I was in the booth for a total of 2.5 hours. Because of like hour and a half, like we were all kind of covering everything, and then like it's just an hour, like me and Tony and Michael kind of brainstorming about it, because like because it had just showed up, like Tony wasn't even expecting it to be there, so he didn't even have like a little thing printed out to put on the display shelf. So like we were kind of discussing like whether it should be in the Nightjar line or the SFX line, which I guess in the end he decided it's kind of a hybrid. It's like an NJ series, so it's a Nightjar unit, but it's then got the kind of the SXL designator on the end to differentiate that it's an SFX-L unit. So I guess it's kind of in between. But anyway, yeah, I could easily talk about that thing forever. So
You did.
the other cool stuff that was in the booth was the PIO case, like we kind of started on. So yeah, we intended to kind of wander around, and then we just saw this case, which what got our interest is that it's a console style case. So it's like a slim case with the video card parallel to the motherboard. So that they're become quite common now. A lot of people have these cases, like both big manufacturers plus the indie designers. But what made this one special is that the GPU fans are facing up along in the same plane as the motherboard, like the CPU cooler, which you don't see very often, because the way you normally do that is you have a really long PCI Express extender so you can flip the video card over. Because like, for people who aren't understanding what I'm talking about, is like, if you think about a video card, like it's plugged into the slot itself, so the fans on the video card are facing like away from the motherboard. And then if you have like a short extender or a riser, and then you like rotate it 90 degrees, then the GPU's fans are facing down, and then like the CPU fan is facing up. So if you want to flip the GPU over, so like the fans are in the same direction, then you have to have like a really long extender normally. Because the extender basically has to kind of like go all the way across the back of the video card and then like come around to the connector. So this motherboard though doesn't do that. It does not use an PCI Express extender at all. What it is it's using a PIO board, which is a parts-in-one. It's basically a do-it-yourself all-in-one. So it's like for all-in-one like kits or bare bones. And they're really interesting. There's not very many of these boards, and like they've traditionally never been available. Like they exist, but you can't actually buy it outside of China. So like for like the Western markets, they're basically non-existent. But they have a PCI Express slot at the top edge of the motherboard, and then it's not perpendicular like normal. It's actually like on the edge of the board parallel. So the video card plugs in just straight into the motherboard, and then ends up being parallel with the GPU fans up, just like no extender, none of that wackiness. And then, so they have a case for it. And then also like, I mean, if Silverstone's making a case for it, then that must mean that there's going to be motherboards available, because like, why would you invest in a mass production case for like a motherboard that nobody can buy? And then it had an ASRock Z170, I forget the model number, MPIO or something like that.
Something like that.
And so, ASRock apparently will be committing to having like retail availability of a PIO board that's compatible with this case. And then I believe Gigabyte, though don't quote me on that, was the other company that Silverstone is talking with. Or no, it may have been Asus actually, for the PIO. So yeah, that's just really it. Like I forget the name of the prototype case. I think it was what was it, guys? It was like was it an FTZ02 PIO or something like that? I forget. But yeah, it was like it's not tiny. Like even though it's using like this motherboard, and it has it could save a lot of space because you don't have to like leave room for the extender. Like this isn't like a particularly small case. Really, I mean, it's not huge, so it's not like bad, but the best thing about it really is that it's going to ensure that these motherboards are available. So then we can maybe see like more cases come out that are like really take advantage of the form factor. So that was really cool. Oh, and then they had a Micro-STX, the RVZ04, I think was the model number.
Yeah.
So it's a Micro-STX Raven. I don't know. It to me, the problem with it is it's a fair bit bigger than it should be otherwise, because of all like the aesthetics elements for the Raven branding, because it's like about a 4-liter case. So it's a little bit, I mean that's tiny compared to most like ITX cases, like don't get me wrong. But considering how tiny Micro-STX is, because it uses the MXM slot for the GPU, It's a little bit on the big side, but I mean, that's the nice thing with like the way Silverstone usually does their cases, because we were talking about this earlier. Usually like the core like stamped frame, because like that's the expensive part to do because of the tooling. Usually that will be shared across several different models, and then they just have different exteriors. So like the actual frame itself on the RVZ04 prototype is pretty small. Like it's not much bigger than is strictly necessary. It's just kind of like all the plastic elements on the outside that make it look like a Raven case, make it a lot bigger. So like I could easily see them doing like a FTZ04, I guess. I'm not sure.
Something like that.
Well, I'm not sure, because like I'm not sure where they're at on the RVZs versus the FTZs, so I don't know like which numbers match up or which are already taken. But like whatever, if they have like a Fortress series version of it with like the unibody aluminum, like that would look amazing. Like it would be a fair bit smaller and it'd look really nice. So I mean, it's cool seeing the RVZ04, like mostly just because it's promoting Micro-STX, which is also cool. But it's like I'm more excited about it because I'm hoping that they'll do a Fortress version of it at some point, like they usually do. So that was neat. And then what else did we see at Silverstone? I guess that was really all I was excited about. Oh, the SX500-SX650-G, which have been like like it's kind of a running joke for when you're talking about SFX. So these are it's a 500 watt and 650 watt gold rated fully modular SFX unit from Silverstone, and then kind of the big advantage they have over the previous flagship SFX is they have a 92 millimeter fan instead of just the little 80 millimeter on the SX600-G. The thing is, we first noticed them at CES 2016, so it's been a year and a half since we first saw them in public, and they're still not out yet. They've just been continually delayed, and from talking with Tony, it's like it's just one of those things. It's like they've had to do like kind of tweaks and fixes, and like each time they like tweak things, they have to redo like the testing and certification, which is just time consuming. So like it just kind of adds up. Like if you get lucky and you get you get everything, like it's dialed in exactly where you want it within a couple, like 1 or 2 or 3 rounds of tweaking, then you can get it out pretty quickly. But if you just luck of the draw, you just kind of, this particular design needs a little more tweaking than normal, and then like you compound it with all the extra time taken for certification and testing, then you just end up with this situation. So supposedly, like for sure, it's looking good and it should release in the next couple months, supposedly. So that's the story, and we'll see. I guess if we look at it at the booth at CES and it's still not out yet, and then we'll have some talking to do with Tony. But supposedly they should be out before the end of the year. And then there's that. I mean, they had some like cool server stuff, which John may talk about, but I mean, there's so much stuff to cover, so I'll just skip that for now. And yeah, so that should cover it for what I saw at the Silverstone booth. And then like ASRock, because like I think oh yeah. So this is, I guess, just a funny story I want to talk about. So like this SFX-L, like amazing unit, right? Shows up while we're at the booth. So obviously we're the first people to see it because like it showed up while we're there. So like immediately after the meeting with Silverstone, because it was like about like what 12:30 by then. So like we all go grab lunch, and then luckily Josh had his laptop on him, so we like there's nowhere, like the convention center, like the exhibition, the Nangang exhibition hall, like there's no seating available anywhere. Like the floor is just covered in booths, and there's just like really nowhere to sit down. Like there's a couple restaurants in the exhibition hall, but like they're like same thing. Like there's really like they're just completely packed. There's so many people there, so we just go grab some burgers, and then just kind of plop down on the floor in like the lobby. So we're just sitting there on the floor of the lobby eating lunch, and the other guys are eating, and I'm like typing away. And then I finished getting this typed up, and then like I'm eating, and then Josh is editing pictures. So we get this article posted. And so yeah, we get the exclusive first look at the SilverStone fanless SFX-L. And I think the first thing I immediately did after that was go to the ASRock, the 4th floor, go to the ASRock booth so I could look at the other thing I really wanted to see, because they had done a press release the previous day or two.
Yep.
So we posted the press release, and then I just had to see it in person. So this is the other thing I was super excited about. And this is definitely the most excited about I've ever been for a motherboard. Like, this thing is just completely nuts. So this is the X299E-ITX AC from ASRock. It is a X299 ITX motherboard, as you may have figured out from the model number. So, I mean, they did the, like, everybody told them they were crazy, but they did the X99 on ITX. But it has its issues. It has the narrow ILM 2011 V3 socket, which it's just a pain for heatsink compatibility. Like, so few heatsinks, especially SFF heatsinks, because SFF heatsinks for 2011 are rare enough. SFF heatsinks for 2011 narrow are like nil. Like, there's almost nothing available. So like, it was a total pain having the narrow ILM on the X99E ITX AC. So then, like, the X299 version, like, not only did they fit 3 PCIe 3.0 X4 M.2 slots on this thing.
3.
Yeah, 3. And they kept 6 SATA 3.0 ports, and there's a USB 3 header, and there's USB 3.1.
4 RAM slots.
Yeah, 4 RAM slots, so you can run quad channel.
But it's 4.
All of that, and it's a square ILM. Like, what? Like, this is crazy. It is just, it's completely bonkers. Like, it is just like, oh, it's so crazy. So like, for people who aren't really familiar with it, like, just look at a picture of it. I crunched the numbers. The square ILM, like the socket itself, plus like kind of the little bit of keep out zone around it, takes up about I think it's like 30-something% of the motherboard, just for the CPU socket. Like, nothing else. Just the socket is like a third of the motherboard. It's just insane. And like, I mean, you could do that and then have like a completely bare bones board, but no, like, it's got 7-phase VRM. It's got 3 M.2, which you can RAID, which that's a whole nother story. I won't get into it, but Intel and VRock, and yeah, it's just if you read my overview of the board, I talk about it some. It's got potential, but it's got a few issues. We'll just say that. But yeah, theoretically, you can RAID 3 M.2 SSDs. So like, this is one of the issues, is like, Intel is only officially supporting Intel drives in a bootable configuration. So maybe that will change. But theoretically, you could do like, say, 3 960 Pros, Samsung 960 Pros, and RAID 0. Like, just, it's not officially supported, but we'll just hope this happens. So you could do like oh geez, what is that? Almost 10 gigabytes per second, I think. Yeah, I think so. If you do RAID 0 with 3 of them, like, it's just nuts. And then yeah, 4 RAM slots. Though the thing is, though, with the RAM slots, is that one of the compromises that they've made, and I'm sure this is going to be very controversial, is that they did SODIMM, which vertical SODIMM slots, which I love. Like, John will back me up on this. Like, the last board that did this is the M8 or
M4A88 Ti Deluxe from Asus.
Yeah, thank you.
I had one.
So that was an AM3. Oh yeah, that wasn't AM3 Plus, right? It was just AM3.
It was just AM3.
Yeah,
so Phantoms.
Okay, yeah. So the thing with AM3 is, like, people don't. I think a lot of, especially like if you're a new builder, you don't realize it. But like, back in the day, you used to have a north bridge and a south bridge on the motherboard that you had to deal with. Like, nowadays, everything is importance on the CPU itself. So you basically have a glorified south bridge that does everything else that's left over. But on AM3, you had the CPU socket, the south bridge, and then the north bridge. You had all three. So like the AM3, like AMD sockets in general are typically a lot bigger than the Intel sockets. So fitting that plus the north bridge and south bridge, plus like just it was a high-end board, that Asus, so it had like a decent VRM and stuff like that into mini ITX was extremely impressive at the time. It still is impressive actually. And one of the ways they did that was they did 2 SODIMM slots to save space. And it's like, it's such a good idea. Like, I really don't understand why like people don't do this more often. You can just save so much space on a motherboard by using SODIMM instead of regular DIMM.
And with today's huge heat spreaders on your RAM, it's about the same height.
Yeah, no kidding. And yeah, that's a whole nother story. But so yeah, the X299E-ITX AC has quad channel, so 4 RAM slots. But one of the ways they did it was using vertical SODIMM, which isn't new. They did it on the, I forget the model number because it's
one of the
like
ASRock rack boards. Yeah,
it's the ASRock rack, which is like kind of their enterprise side of things. So they had one that was the C612 chipset, I think, which is like the Xeon chipsets. Though you could use a Xeon on X99, which, just real quick, that's another stupid thing Intel did, is you can't use Xeons on X299, so you can't do ECC, which is stupid product market segmentation. Anyway, so yeah, ASRock rack board X99 had quad SODIMM as well. So yeah, we see quad SODIMM come to the enthusiast side with the X299, which to me is amazing. I really, really hope this becomes a trend and that we see more like enthusiast ITX boards with vertical SODIMM. Because like it just saves so much space, so then you can just fit more cool goodies on a motherboard. So yeah, 4 SODIMM slots, and then like there's like 2 daughter boards. So there's a daughter, like the SODIMM slots, like it really just look at a picture would be easiest. But the 2 SODIMM slots are like front to back. There's 2 at the top edge of the board and then 2 at the bottom edge of the board, like between the socket and the PCI Express slot. And then at the front edge of the board, kind of like in front of the CPU socket, is a daughter board with it's got the 6 SATA ports. So that's kind of awkward because they're kind of like sticking up in the air. And then the USB 3.0 header. And unfortunately, it's got the front panel header for the power button and like the front panel, front LEDs and all that stuff. So the board is removable. Like there's 2 screws that connect it to the VRM heatsink, and then it is a repurposed M.2 connector, which to be clear, you cannot just stick another M.2 SSD in it. I can have 4-way, as cool as that would be. It's just using the physical M.2 connector because it's like they already have it in bulk because like they have 3 of them on this board. So obviously they're buying lots of these connectors. So just buy another one and just use it. So just to be clear, this is not like another SSD connector. They're just reusing it. But it is removable though. So in theory, you could remove it and just like have that much better clearance, or if just for like, if you think it's ugly, or just for philosophical purposes, like you just disagree with the existence of SATA anymore. So you can remove the card, it's removable, but the front panel header's on it. So that's it's kind of a problem. So I've been talking with them, and apparently it's still early enough in development that it could possibly we'll see some things change. So fingers crossed we'll see the front panel header either move back onto the motherboard somewhere, though there's just like no space. So I don't know if that will happen, or possibly either ASRock will do it, or they may give us the information we need for somebody in the community to make a custom PCB, like just a really tiny one that just plugs into the slot and all that has on it's just that front panel header. So got a couple options I've kind of been discussing back and forth with ASRock, so we'll see. And then the other daughter board is on the other side of the CPU socket. So the CPU socket is basically completely boxed in once everything is installed. And then it has one of the M.2. The other 2 M.2 connectors are on the back side of the motherboard. So like the third one is on the top side on this daughter board. Unfortunately, like if you don't need all those M.2s, you can remove this other card, but it also has a USB 3.0 controller. I have yet to verify exactly what that's connected to, but I think it's like at least two. I don't think all four of the 3.0 ports on the back, but at least two of them, and then possibly like one other like I'm not sure what. But I think he mentioned there was some kind of lane controller on that card as well. So you can remove that card since it is pretty big, but you'll lose some of the USB on the back and possibly other stuff. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. But the problem with it is it's pretty tall. Like we measured it at CES because I think everybody was rocking calipers.
Yep.
Just because that's SFF network. That's how we roll, man.
Yep.
And then we measured that daughter board at about 40 to 42 millimeters tall. So that's pretty tall thing, especially since it's kind of close to the CPU socket. So like I'm worried that like with top-down heat sinks like the Noctua L12 or the C14, I'm worried that it's going to interfere.
I get the feeling closed-loop coolers are going to be almost mandatory for this board.
Well, that's the thing, though.
tabs.
Like that's kind of the frustrating part is that like you have the square ILM socket, which is amazing for CPU heatsink compatibility, so you're not stuck with water cooling. But then you have it completely boxed in by all these boards, like the SODIMs, which they're not too bad. But then like these two daughter boards. So like I'm hoping that I'm hoping the front board, they can make it so that we can get the front panel header accessible without having that board. So then that saves you space at the front edge. And then I'm hoping the M.2 board can be reduced in height. So then that way it's not so much it may not be an actual problem now. I won't know until I have one and actually start test fitting things. But it would potentially be less of a problem if they reduce the height of the M.2 board. So luckily we've caught them early enough that we can kind of have this discussion and it's not just like set in stone. So that's really wonderful. So all that, it's got USB 3.1, 10 gig. It does not have Thunderbolt, unfortunately, which is a disappointment, but it's just, there's no room for it. Like they wanted to put it on there and there's just like nowhere to put the controller. It's just like, if you look at this board, it's like every square millimeter of this thing is like jammed. So yeah, I'm excited for it, obviously. So we'll look forward to that. I should get a review unit. And then, like I said, I'll be buying one also, though, just so we don't have the weird thing with company property being used for like personal use and all that nonsense. So I'm thinking what I may do is I may give it away. So yeah, guys, keep an eye out for that. But we'll see. And then what else? So yeah, that ASRock. Definitely the X299. Personally, I'm most excited for. But I mean, also at the booth we saw the Micro-STX, which it's really awesome because we definitely have gotten a lot of like traffic on the forum and the news site for the Micro-STX when we covered it at. I guess that was CES this year, wasn't it? It hasn't been that long. And so yeah, they had it at the booth. Oh, and the big thing is that so at CES the most that they were committed to was up to the GTX 1060, and the reason was like power, like if they could deliver enough power through the MXM slot. Like they weren't sure if they could up the power through the slot or if they would have to add like an auxiliary power connector, and it was just kind of a mess. So at Computex, we got to see it, and they had the GTX 1080 MXM working in the Micro-STX. So now you can get and for people, like definitely look at our coverage of Micro-STX, but it is tiny. It is such a tiny motherboard. It's basically 5x7 inches, because it's based off of the original Intel 5x5 spec, which is like even smaller than my mini ITX, and then like ASRock's like, oh, well, I mean, this is small, which is cool, but what if people wanted like more graphics horsepower, and even smaller than ITX? So they basically just took mini STX, made it a bit bigger, like a bit taller to fit an MXM slot. And now you can do it with a GTX 1080. It's crazy. The other thing is like it's a 1080, but they also have it powered through the slot, which is really weird. Because if you look at reference 1080 MXM boards, they all have a power connector. But apparently, like the whole spec for MXM is just a weird mess, and it's like not really clear like what exactly it's capable of. But I guess ASRock has found that it can do, I think, what did he say? I think 240 watts through the slot.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, which is insane. And so like, well, I'm not sure if it's 240 watts through the slot or just 240 watts in general, and then the 1080 just happens to be within what the slot is actually capable. I don't know. It's a mess. Like if you look at official specs, like the MXM slot, according to like the specs you would generally find can't do a 1080, but I guess it can. I don't know. But it's got 1080. It works. It's awesome. Yeah. And then the problem though is the 1080 MXM cards are expensive. I think the price we were generally told for just the 1080 card alone, like nothing else, just the card, is about like what, $1,100.
Yeah,
I think is what we were hearing, which is that's pretty steep. I mean, that's pretty. Yeah, that's expensive.
that's just gouging.
Yeah, and I mean the problem is, I mean, it's unfortunate, but there's not a whole lot ASRock can do about it because it's kind of an NVIDIA thing.
They're choosing to price it that high.
Yeah, and I kind of get the like my impression, like what I'm suspecting is happening is like NVIDIA doesn't really want, like, even though it sells them more chips, I don't think they particularly want to see discrete MXM desktops become a thing, because there's no room to differentiate on MXM. Like it has to strictly confine to a certain form factor and spec in order to work, because it's originally designed for being used in laptops, so you can have an theoretically upgradable laptop, though in practice nobody ever does it. So like, even though like theoretically you could upgrade a laptop, because nobody does it, it's not a big deal. But if it's on a desktop, then it's much more likely that people will use it. Like they'll use it in place of a normal desktop GPU, and then B, that they'll upgrade it down the road. And I think NVIDIA is probably worried that it'll cannibalize the sales of their add-in board partners.
Yes. Yep.
Because the problem is there's no room to differentiate. So like the only way you can differentiate, it's basically a commodity. It's just price. Like who has the cheapest one? Because like you can't put a big fancy cooler on it, because like the cooling solution basically is all standardized, so everybody's going to have the same cooler. You can't really go crazy on like the VRMs or the overclocking or the design. I guess you could put RGBs on it, but that's about it. So like if MXM on the desktop really takes off, and like, then that would just kill all the board partners, because it's like the only way it competes on price. And so then the market will just get ate up by like the big companies, like who can, like EVGA is pretty small realistically compared to like somebody like Colorful. Mm-hmm. So like they would just get completely just choked out of the market. So yeah, pricing is unfortunate, but ASRock says that they've been discussing with the MXM card vendors. So the two ones would be Atina, who does NVIDIA, and then TUL, who does AMD, though I think they can do NVIDIA. I think they have a partnership, but I think they focus on AMD. Mm-hmm. So like, and ASRock's been talking with them to ensure that like when you buy the Desk Mini barebone system, it's not going to be a problem. It's going to come with a card. The problem is going to be like say like Vega comes out, or like just year, 2 years down the road, like whatever next comes out, will you be able to upgrade it? Will there be MXM cards that aren't just like an absolute fortune? And so ASRock's been working with them to ensure that there will be like retail availability of cards that aren't like exorbitantly priced, so you can actually upgrade the system. Because at the end of the day, I mean, what's the point of it being like a discrete GPU that's swappable if you can't actually upgrade it, because you just can't afford to. Yeah. So then at the end of the day, then there's not really any advantage to just using a custom solution and making it even smaller, like Zotac does with the Magnus units. So I don't know. It's interesting. I still have some. It's a really cool form factor. I really hope it does well. To kind of, it's because it's different. It's innovative. But yeah, I'm still kind of skeptical on if they'll really be able to conquer the MXM problem. Because yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. And then as far as other stuff that I saw, let's see. I did. SFX-L everywhere. Like
Yes.
yes,
Power supply
so
madness.
many SFX-L. Everybody had one. Like I definitely check out the roundup. I did a whole roundup on all the SFX-L. Like most of them that I saw, which was cool. But then there's a couple that I missed. So like I kind of scraped together information from the coverage that was available. But yeah, so let's see. Yeah, Be Quiet had one. Akasa had one. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but yeah, tons of them. Probably the most interesting though, because like several of them were just like the Akasa one is just the Surfa / high power platform that everybody uses for 500-watt SFX-L units. Like it's available under like tons of different brands, so that's not particularly interesting. But then also the Zigmatech had one that's based on it's still Surfa, but it's the higher end platform that's also used in the SilverStone SX500 LPT. So that one will be interesting to look at, what's different. And then probably the most exciting was that Superflower, which despite the name is like if people aren't familiar with them, they're a really reputable company, a PSU OEM. They do really good work. The thing is, like in Europe, they're probably a more familiar brand. In the US, I don't think they sell under Superflower at all in the US. Like pretty much the only way you get a Superflower PSU is like if it's some of the higher end EVGAs and then maybe one or two other brands is the only way you can get them here.
Yeah.
Because they don't sell it under their own brand in the US. But yeah, they do some really, really nice PSUs for ATX. And then, they were showing some. Though when I went to the booth, like, I guess, I don't know. I guess they don't know who I am, which is fine. That's understandable. But yeah, like the guy I talked to just kind of like, I asked him like, oh, do you, like, I know you have an SFX because I've read coverage of it. And he's just like, oh, yeah, like a 700-watt platform like we're working on. Like, that's not all he said about it. But yeah, unfortunately, we also couldn't get by the EVGA suite, but they also had like their version because they work a lot with Superflower. Like I said, they're basically the main way you would get a Superflower unit in the US is if you buy a higher end EVGA power supply. So yeah, they're doing it. So even like what coverage there is of the Superflower, it's mostly kind of vague. Like the details aren't real set, but the EVGA will be a 650-watt, 750-watt gold rated. They're semi-fanless, but the cool thing is that like you usually only see this on some of the Seasonics. The EVGA and the Superflower SFX-L units will have a toggle, so you can toggle whether it's semi-fanless or not. So like ideally it would just have a really good semi-fanless implementation and you wouldn't want to turn it off. But if for some reason it does suck, which unfortunately is fairly common with SFX and SFX-L units, then yeah, you can just flip a switch and just have it so the fan is always on. So that's cool. This is what I was getting to. The most interesting part about all that though is that I believe Eris, I can't pronounce his last name. He does all the PSU reviews for Tom's Hardware and Tech Power Up. So they knew who he was, and they talked to him. And then they said that, I think the quote was something along the lines of that the entire engineer, like all the engineers at Super working on the new SFX-L platform. Like to me, that's just like, that's insane. if you think about where SFX and SFX-L was just like a year ago or 2 years ago, like to think that we've come from like the only high-end SFX unit available was the 600-watt SilverStone, and then just like 2 years later, like Superflower thinks that it's important enough to do an SFX-L unit that the whole engineering department's working on it. Like, that's just nuts. Like,
that is a very fast.
Yeah, it's
transition.
a huge like change of outlook. Because I mean, like Superflower is not a huge company. Like, they're one of the smaller OEMs. So like, this wouldn't be as mind blowing as if like FSP or somebody did this. That would just like, that would be like complete insanity. But even then, I mean, Superflower is not tiny either. So that they think this is so important is just really interesting. And then, so you have all these SFX-L units. There weren't really, I mean, I didn't see any. I don't know if you got cases that use it though. But now that there's more power supplies, then it's just a matter of time before there's more cases that use it. And then if there's more cases that use it, then there's more incentive power supplies, and then, I mean, it snowballs. So like, we could definitely be on the verge of just seeing kind of like of like the SFX and SFX-L, both the power supplies and the cases. We may be at the kind of the turning point in the hockey stick. So yeah, that's exciting. And then other stuff, that's really, FlexATX, which there was lots of units, though it's kind of like, it's hard to get super excited about it because like most everybody is still aiming at enterprise and industrial, so like they're going to be loud. Yeah, definitely check out my roundup if you're interested in that. Like, probably the most interesting thing is that SilverStone has one. It's a 350 watt SFX FlexATX unit that they're working on, and that they've painted it black. Which I was talking to Tony, and it's still mostly aimed at the industrial market, but I mean, they are taking like the consumer market into account, because like, why else would you paint it black? And then so that's interesting that they're painting it black. I've talked to them about the noise, so hopefully that they'll kind of hopefully they'll tune it more kind of towards the consumer market, so it's not just like super loud, but we'll see. Yeah, FlexATX. I guess that's about it. I can't think of a whole lot else. I mean, tons of cool stuff. But it's like, yeah, the guys are saying, yeah, I've been talking long enough, so I could talk about power supplies forever, I guess.
And you did.
Yeah. Yes, I did. So,
And we love you for it.
All right. So yeah, definitely if you're interested in it and want to hear about power supplies, I got like 3 different roundups. So like, I got SFX, SFX-L, and then FlexATX, and then I got a couple individual articles. So if you want to see more power supply Computex coverage, then just go read those. So, okay. So
fair enough.
Hand it over.
All right. Well, next in the alphabetical order would be you, John. So I don't know if there's much left to talk about, but
well, you guys saw tons of stuff, so you better have stuff to talk about.
There's a little bit.
All right, go for it, John.
There's a few things. Noctua's booth was interesting. They're still working on their, the new generation of their A-series fan with the, it's a 0.5 millimeter blade tip clearance between that and the frame, which is insanity. And their liquid crystal polymer. Plastic.
Sterox. Yeah,
Sterox. Which they had to basically develop or co-develop a new plastic to make this design work. It's, yeah. What else was there? See, now that James has been talking for ages, I've kind of drawn a blank. I spent most of the time after the first day just wandering around, finding some of the smaller companies that possibly aren't quite as well known. We had Segotep, which I relatively recently reviewed their RGB fans because, well, we have to do RGB at least once. They had a new low-profile FlexATX case, all aluminium. They also had
FlexATX.
Yeah, 3-slot.
Oh, that's cool.
It had it was a 3-slot case, low profile with a FlexATX power supply. So they also had a SFX power supply, but no sticker on it, so no idea.
Just real quick, that turned out to be a SFX-L unit. So yeah, anybody interested in that unit, you can look at the SFX-L roundup. So I'm really glad you guys saw that though, because like I had no idea about it, and there's no English coverage of it. So yeah, it's really cool that you spotted that. So yeah, thanks for that.
It's just interesting. Like even on Friday, the last day that we were at the show, we still found booths that we didn't know were there. Like companies that I searched. I was kind of hoping Segotep would be there because they do a lot of interesting like Chinese market only stuff. Well, Chinese market and New Zealand for some reason. Which I had a talk with their marketing manager, and they said, New Zealand's the only Western market they sell to, which is
insane. What was the reason for that?
He didn't really give one. I get the feeling possibly because we don't have the likes of Lian Li here, so it's less competition for that level of stuff. What else was there? I had to be dragged away from the BitFenix booth at least twice. Literally the only case BitFenix had on display that I could see was the portal. Almost threw up.
You mean the pillow?
Yeah, well, they call it the portal now.
Oh yeah. It's huge. I didn't realize how big it was. Like I guess like I read the specs, but like I didn't appreciate how big it is till I saw it in person. And it's like you would think it'd be like with the general layout, you would think it would be pretty compact, but
nope.
Somehow they managed to take what should be a compact layout and then like made it not compact.
Hey, that's BitFenix true to form right there. On the because I do the cooler and case reviews, I went around looking for coolers, and there wasn't anything really spectacular outside of Cryorig, who were showing off their all-copper the C7 cooler.
Yes.
Which is an amazing piece of machining, and it's gorgeous.
That's the main thing for me. Is it just looks.
It's just pretty.
Really pretty.
They had, I think, they pretty much did a copper variant of each one of their cooler SKUs. But obviously the C7's the one we're interested in, and this is from Steve. Did we figure out what his role was? Marketing manager? I don't know. He's high up in Cryorig.
And it's a small company too. It's only like 12 folk, I think.
Something like that, yeah. And they're expecting a 2 to 3% performance increase over the all aluminium one, but apparently they in testing, which they're gonna have to retest it because they didn't believe the results. It gets 10 degrees cooler than the aluminium C7, which is more insanity.
I do think that is that. I kind of agree with them. It seems too good to be true. Yep. So I'll await judgment until we have more data. But it is impressive.
I'm happy to test one myself. I can't imagine it'd be particularly cheap to
be expensive to ship. That thing is heavy.
Yeah, side by side, they had a original C7 at the booth, and holding both, the copper one must be 3 times the mass of it. That's
because like the C7 copper would be a good paperweight. The the R5, like that would be a good anchor.
You could stop a plane taking off with that one. Also, while we're at the Cryorig booth, they've got the Taku case, the monitor stand style case. It's very close to production. They're trying something different with it, which is a Kickstarter campaign rather than going to retail. I think the reasoning behind that was it's such a different concept. They don't want to really put... How would I put it? going to production with it, they're not sure if they'll actually be able to sell it on the
It's risk
market.
management.
Yeah.
It's risk management. I mean, the benefit, there are two benefits from their point of view of being able to do a Kickstarter for it. One of them is that they can accrue all the capital up front from people that are interested. And two, they're able to actually get a sense of demand and put a floor as to like what's the minimum MOQ that they're comfortable with, that they feel like that they'll still be able to feasibly do financially. So, you know, I think there's definitely some awkwardness with like an established company that's already selling products doing this sort of thing. I think with them it's a little less awkward just because A, they're smaller, and B, it's something that's very, very new for them, as well as something that's obviously quite different than what else is in the marketplace. But it is still
a relatively expensive case.
Yeah. So like, but it did beg the question to be asked. But they, you know, they were thoughtful about it. They're not doing it for no reason, and they're not pulling a pebble and doing it for PR's sake. You know, to them, it was just a sensible arrangement.
I see that criticism leveled a lot at like big companies trying to do, because I think, was it Samsung or Lenovo? I think it was Samsung actually did like a few crowdfunded projects, didn't they? For like wearables, like a watch or something like that. But like, actually, I like it, because the thing is like that this is, people think that it's a cash grab. It's like, oh, like you're asking me to pay for your R&D and market research, like, and you're a huge company, you can afford it, why should I have to pay for this? I think a lot of people kind of think that way when a big established company does like Kickstarter or whatever. The problem is that you're paying for that market research and R&D regardless. Like, it's just a matter of whether you're just paying it directly to the project that you actually are interested in, or you're paying for all the failed R&D projects and failed products through higher prices of the stuff that you do buy. Because like, for every product that's successful, I mean, you got to know that internally there's probably 10 to 20 that they killed, and there's probably several that they didn't kill that they should have, that went to market and flopped, and now you're paying for it because they got to recoup costs, so they got to raise prices. So like, I would rather see big companies use Kickstarter more, and then that way that the money that they take in for it goes directly to the products that people actually want to buy, rather than indirectly paying for products that, like, A, they didn't want, or that should never have existed in the first place. So actually, I really like this. Like, because I mean, if you think about it, if they had done all the tooling, well, they said they've already done a lot of the tooling, just because they had to in order to get to even this point. But they had done it all, they released it, and then like spent all that money on like the R&D and the tooling and the marketing and the production and all that, and went to the market, and then it flopped. Like, now Cryorig's not a big company, now they're out all this money. So let's say like maybe they have to raise prices, or maybe like they can't bring to market the copper versions, which people do want, and then like they just can't afford to like do all the R&D and marketing and stuff for that now. So like it's just kind of an annoyance I have with people, and like they're feeling that big companies shouldn't do Kickstarter, when I think it's the opposite. Like, we should encourage it. Because then that way the customers get the products that they want, and they can influence its development to make it better for what they want, rather than just kind of being handed down this finished thing from a company that's like almost there but not quite. That could have been so much better if they had just actually directly asked the people who would end up buying it. So just my little 2 bits on that real quick. It's just because it annoys me.
And tacked on to the end of that, just loaded up the Kickstarter page for the Taku. 47 days to go, and 26,000 out of 100,000. Which
I don't think that's because I think it's a great product. I don't know. Like, I mean, it's a really nice case. It's a little on the big side, I think we'll all agree.
Yeah, it was bigger than I expected it to be.
Yeah, it was, but it's nice. I mean, and they make the argument, and I could kind of understand it, that the way it's designed to be used, you could slip your keyboard underneath it and have your monitor sitting on top of it. So like the actual space, like if you count the space saved versus the bigger size of the case, then it evens out or whatever. But it's a nice case. I like it. I think it's successful. I think here it's a PR problem. Because like we knew about this case, there was a lot of interest in the case, but then like the Kickstarter just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, we weren't expecting this.
Yeah, so
I
think
launched into our email boxes.
Yeah, I mean they have like 47 days to go. So I think if I recall, I believe when we talked to them, they said that they're going to send out like a couple units to like reviewers and big time YouTubers and stuff like that to get more coverage.
I want to play with one.
Yeah, it looks really nice. And then, so I think there's still potential for them to hit the goal. But like, I think if they relaunched it in a few months after kind of refining it and like with better awareness, I think they could easily succeed. But we'll see. But that's the thing, though, is like if they don't, then they can learn, and then they wouldn't have spent all that money for mass production. Yeah.
Anywho, this is the James podcast.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. I'll try to shut up, but
no, go for it.
No, don't, please.
Yeah, I'm kind of light on this. Go on. I spent most of my time trying to do logistics and management of everyone, and making sure we covered all the booths that we're supposed to cover and get to all the meetings we're supposed to get to.
And we would have been so lost without all that prep work. Like, I mean, it was a lot crazier than I expected actually being on the floor. But yeah, it's really good that you did that.
Yeah, there's a couple of months of me stressing quite badly, just trying to get everything organized and meetings with people and creating a document for us all to refer to and stuff like that. And then realizing at the last minute we're missing stuff. Fun and games. I suppose that's the joy of it all. Trying to think what else we saw that intrigued me.
Yeah, I'm actually looking through our newsreel right now.
What hasn't been covered yet?
I physically participated in like a third of this stuff. Oh, I know one you can talk about.
The AMD press.
AMD's partners love PC, don't they?
Oh, that was a cringe fest.
Well, that part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we could definitely talk about that.
Yeah. So we managed to get into the AMD press conference thingy, hoping to see stuff on Vega and Threadripper and the APU stuff, which unfortunately how would I put it? We got
an announcement of an announcement.
Yeah. The press conference was very much to appease the shareholders more than appease the consumers. There was a couple of benchmarks, a couple of demonstrations, but nothing concrete, except for a couple of release dates, which end of June and end of July, I believe.
That's Threadripper,
I think, is end of June, and Vega's end of July.
Was that like release date, or that's just when they're announcing it?
No, that was release date, if I remember correctly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Correct.
Vega will be showing off more at SIGGRAPH
correct.
Next month.
Yeah, so the slide literally says Threadripper Summer 2017.
Yeah.
So keeping it nice and loose, but
okay.
Two down from that should have the release date on it. Oh, could be wrong.
For Threadripper?
Yeah.
Like a specific release date? I didn't know that they had. Heck, I was there. I know that the Frontier Edition for Vega that had a firm launch date because that was this month. That was like at the end of the month.
That was it. So,
but in terms of the launch, the quote unquote launch of Vega, they said that was going to be SIGGRAPH. So that'd be basically everything. That'd be talking through the introductory line that uses Vega.
Sorry, I was mixing Threadripper up with Epic, which is June 20th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which Epic is Epic. So many cores. I think there are one package is 32 cores, 64 threads, and you can get two of those in a server. So 64 cores, 128 threads in one box.
And the CPUs are only the size of diner plates.
Yeah, well, it's all those cores.
I'm actually kind of fearful of what, like, if you really loaded those, what the power consumption would be. Oof.
Well, from what I've seen so far with what I've seen so far of Threadripper, that's going to be maxed out at about 175 watts, I think was the number I saw. Epic, who knows? Server CPUs can go upwards of like 225.
Yeah.
Because they're designed, like, there's proper thermal designs and they're designed to run like that. They're not, how would I put it? Servers generally don't have the flexibility in changing coolers out, yada yada yada, that you get out of consumer boxes.
They don't really care, right? I mean, they care about power consumption as a ongoing expense, but it's not like, oh, I really want my server to be quieter.
No, it's in a room with 40mm fans everywhere. Who cares how loud it is?
Yeah.
But you've got you're looking basically for compute density rather than
compute density, computation per watt.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Like that. Which apparently the Epic itself was significant. Ignore the scrolling in the background. I'm just trying to remember. There's been so much content that we've had that it's hard to remember concrete figures and everything.
So they're saying 2.5x performance in memory-bound workloads, and then for virtualized workloads, it was anywhere from like a 10 to 50% improvement.
Yeah.
And that's TTC, time to completion. Yeah. So that's working through batches of
the
whatever.
10% figure you're quoting is also one Epic chip versus two Xeons.
Yes.
Yeah, so...
It was two... I forget which exact chip. There's so many Xeon chips I can't remember.
E2699A-V4s.
Yeah, so these are all top-line figures as well. These are looking at the top of the perspective stacks for each vendor as well.
But
so yeah, I'll be interested. It'll be interesting to see pricing as well for Epic and the
But it was interesting considering the recent what's the word for it, controversy around X299 that AMD threw a few cheap shots at Intel. All of the Threadripper chips will have quad channel memory, unlike Kaby Lake X. Was it? All of them will have all 64 PCI Express lanes, that kind of stuff. Just the little cheap shots that AMD was throwing out that they kind of afford to throw out at the moment. It was interesting to see AMD actually having some confidence.
I mean, it's a good point of differentiation. I think there are plenty of folks that don't necessarily need lots of compute power, but they want all of those lanes because they have lots of ancillary devices. So.
They'll be doing GPU kind of performance things.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been mutual frustration by pretty much everyone that Intel had chosen to segment the HEDT marketplace by putting, I mean, it was like $600 basically. You had to pay extra just to have that connectivity, and that's like, screw you, Intel. It literally costs you less to. I mean, yeah. So I'm happy that they're doing that. I don't know that it'll do much to cajole Intel to avoid that bifurcation, but I think with what they've already announced with respect to their own, for X299, that to a certain point seems to be a pretty direct response to Threadripper.
Yeah.
The fact that they've expanded the scope of that line of processors. Now there's like 9 of them, which is crazy.
And Xeon
but
Gold
the fact
and
that
whatnot as well.
Right, but now they go as low as a non-hyper-threaded 4-core, and we're talking a price point like $200-300. I mean, the floor used to be...
What do you guys think? Like, do you think anybody would actually buy that?
I don't know, because
the cheap Xeon.
The total cost, the total cost relative to just standard desktop processors is quite a bit higher, but you're not getting much since they're still putting those asinine limitations when it comes to the interoperability of the platform. So I struggle to think of who, I can't think of a context right now off the top of my head where I would make a recommendation in any circumstance to look at that versus just looking at the top of the line desktop processors.
Because the cost of the motherboard itself is going to be significantly higher.
It's not just the price point of that, it's the total price point of your whole build is going to increase because there are cost implications. Yeah,
because like the cheapest, let me check, the cheapest Kaby Lake X is $240 for a non-hyper threading quad, and then you can get the cheapest Skylake X would be the 7800X, which is a 6-core hyper-threading for $390. So it's like basically $150 more.
And you get
which
twice the
in and
CPU
of itself, in and of itself, that's expensive. But then if you think as a percentage increase of the total cost of the platform, it's like very small, relatively speaking. I mean, yeah, 150 onto 240, that's a huge bump in price. But like 150 extra when you're already paying like $300 for the motherboard, $300 for the RAM, and then power supply, and then video card. Because I mean, presumably if you're doing X299, it's not going to be a low-end system. So then like $150 on top of all that doesn't. I mean, I don't see why anybody would buy Kaby Lake X. It just, to me, it seems just completely stupid.
It's such a gimped platform overall.
It is,
because you only get Kaby Lake X is all just dual core memory, isn't it?
Yep, it's Kaby Lake, just in the 2066 socket.
Anyhow, is there anything else interesting that I saw? I finally got to meet the guys I've been doing business with for a couple of years.
Yeah, that was nice.
Nobody mentioned that.
Which one did you say you met that you recognized him from like way back?
Oh, way
Elvis?
back. Yeah. About 5-6 years ago, I was doing a quad socket small form factor build. Yes, I said what I said. And I approached Deepcool for just trying to source some extra fans that you couldn't buy standalone that would suit the coolers that I was using. And I ended up talking to Elvis, who was the APAC.
Oh, wait, his name's actually Elvis?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were just joking.
No. Yeah, I ended up talking to her, adding it to Facebook. We got talking. Nothing ever really eventuated, but at least I had a contact in Deepcool for a while. So I fell out of contact with him. Elvis left the Deepcool. Yeah, that was pushed. And then we walk into the ID calling booth at Computex, and this guy comes up to me and says, "I recognize you from somewhere. Haven't we met or haven't we talked?" And I look at his name badge. It says Elvis. It's like, it's this guy. Like,
that's so cool.
Out of all, like, how big the PC industry is, it's crazy that you end up meeting someone who's left a company that you dealt with like 5 or 6 years ago. One of the many coincidences that happened that week.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything really off the top of my head to add.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I have a few things that I would like to talk about personally, but actually, no, there's one thing I think you should talk about. Actually, there's one thing I think James should talk about. Because you're the one. Huh?
Go on.
So there's more. God, I don't know. I didn't see it, but we were talking about it towards the end of Computex. So, but I don't know much about it, and James knows a lot more. So I'm going to throw this one to you, James. And it's the eGPU dock from Gigabyte. Because one of the things we saw a decent amount of were eGPUs, and this is actually something that I personally have been interested in. So one of my things about what I found fascinating was just sort of the more general topic of eGPUs industry-wide. But the one that was kind of the most interesting to us, certainly most interesting to me, that I didn't get to see, but I think you did, or at least some of our crew did, was the one from Gigabyte. So if you don't mind.
Yeah, because like I'm interested in it in the abstract, I guess, like eGPUs, because I don't have like a laptop at the moment. Though I think I'll need one for next year, like I said. But yeah, it's really interesting. The problem with eGPU is that they're all huge. like up the ones released up until now. So you look at the Razer Core, which is the smallest of kind of like, I guess you could say, the first generation of mass production eGPUs, and it's big and it's heavy. Like it's not something you want to carry around very much, because like it looks really nice because of all the aluminum, but that comes at a cost, mostly in weight. Well, it does cost and cost too. But then like all the other ones that like we saw at CES are also really big. So like Power Color. Geez, I can't even think of them all. But like they're all humongous boxes, which I don't understand why. There's no reason for them to be that big. Like they're all stupidly big.
They are. They're computer-sized boxes.
Even though I have absolutely no use for an eGPU box at the moment, like it's like I've been keeping tabs on it just because it annoys me so much that they're so big. It's like so inefficient. So yeah, like we were at the Gigabyte suite because they have. This is just an annoying thing. Like everybody, like we were all basically spent all our time at the Nangang Exhibition Center, which is where all the like a huge exhibition center on the outskirts of Taipei. That's where all the booths were. It's not that far away, like realistically. Like you could just hop on, like there's a metro station right at the hall. You just like hop on it, go down a couple stations, hop off, and then just walk like a block or two to get to the other exhibition areas. But the like Innovex, which is like all like mostly like startups and like business stuff, and then also they had like the other hall for like display and peripherals. So like basically none of this stuff we're really interested in. Those were all there near the Taipei 101 tower. Like there's like pretty much no computer stuff there that like we're interested in, except Gigabyte. For some dumb reason, Gigabyte's booth was there, so you had to go all like I say across town. It's really not that far, but like everything is concentrated at the exhibition center, so it's really annoying that you have to go just to see Gigabyte. But they didn't have the AM4 ITX board. But we talked to the ladies at the booth, and they were able to kind of get us contact with the VIP suite, which is on the conference room floor, the 36th floor of the Taipei 101 tower, which I don't know if we'll talk about it. We all went there. It's a really cool tower. If you're ever in Taipei, definitely check it out. Yeah, please sponsor us, Taipei Tourist Center.
They had like 2 floors of gift shops on the way back. It was ridiculous.
Like, it's a tourist trap. But anyway, so you get to the VIP suite, and then like we talked to the motherboard marketing guy. I think Matthew. Yeah, it was Matthew. And then the AM4 board wasn't like somebody else was looking at it. The AM4 ITX board, and so I was like, oh well, we'll just show you the EG. It's like, oh okay, whatever. I had no idea anything about this. Then we look at it, and this thing is tiny. It's the Gigabyte Aorus GTX 1070 box, I believe is the name of it. And yeah, like the name says, it has a GTX 1070. Like, surprise, surprise. No. Yeah, who would have thought? So this is the Gigabyte ITX 1070. So it's the real small one. They wouldn't say that it was a replaceable card. I mean, they were kind of looking at it from warranty, and I think Intel, I don't know if they are now because they're supposed to be open about Thunderbolt, but definitely in the past from talking to everybody is that they were extremely inconsistent and controlling and temperamental about eGPU, like over Thunderbolt 3. And I think Gigabyte didn't want to commit to the idea of it being upgradable because they want to make sure that they don't upset Intel and that it gets certified. Because one of the things, like Intel doesn't like certifying it if it's not like, they want it to be plug and play. And you can't really have plug and play if it's upgradable because you don't know what they're going to put in it, like the user's going to end up using. So you can't really, it's a little harder to guarantee compatibility. So Gigabyte wouldn't commit to whether it's upgradable, but it doesn't look like a custom GPU. It's not an MXM, so it has to be just the standard 1070 ITX card. So there's that. It's tiny. The casing is basically just big enough to fit the card in height and depth. And then the problem with a lot of the other GPU cases is that they use SFX. So like SFX and just a GPU alone don't really kind of mesh in any kind of configuration nicely. Like the proportions are just too different. So no matter how you fit it, you end up with kind of an awkwardly sized layout. Even within that, though, there's lots of room for improvement, which is why I'm so frustrated with all the other eGPU docks. Because even with the poor layout that comes with using SFX, they're still way bigger than they need to be. But the Gigabyte one uses a FlexATX. I believe it's an enhanced unit, just like the way the fan grill is shaped. But they wouldn't say what it was, and they wouldn't let us take it apart. So I don't know. But it looks like FlexATX. And so they have it just like on the back of the video card. And FlexATX is 150 millimeters long, or like, I'm assuming this one is. That's what they normally are for the short versions. And then the video card is, I'm not sure actually. I don't know off the top of my head. It's like 170, 180 millimeter, I think, for the Gigabyte. So yeah, so like the FlexATX is on the back of that. There's like, I guess the Thunderbolt 3 circuit board's not very big. And that's the whole box. And then it's like, it's got venting on the side of the video card. Oh, most important feature is it's got RGBs.
Yep,
so
of course.
You gotta have them RGBs, man.
Dead in the market.
No Computex 2017 product is complete without them. And so yeah, it's tiny. The other interesting, and I think probably Josh, what you're interested in, is that one of the guys with us had a MacBook, and while we went over to talk about the ITX board and had them distracted, he ran over and plugged his MacBook in and recognized right away. So I think, I'm not real sure on this because, like I said, I don't have any interest in it personally, so I don't know all the details, but I believe that means that they're using one of the newer TI chips, or at least maybe not necessarily, but whatever they're using seems to plug and play with OS X just fine. So that was a really interesting detail. So yeah, it's a really interesting box. I have an article on it, and I believe the pricing is also very, very reasonable. It's like $600, which...
But with the graphics card.
Yeah, because let me check. The Razer Core, so this is just the box and the power supply is $499.
Yeah.
Yeah, $499 for the Razer Core. So that gets you the case, and that also uses a FlexATX, or at least some kind of server type power supply, and maybe 1U. So like, you're not even like getting the advantage of like the more traditional, like standard power supply with the Razer Core. I mean, it looks cool, but it's like, it's heavy, and it's like $500, and you had to add a video card to it. And then Gigabyte will sell you the box that's like a quarter the size for $100 more with
the graphics card.
Yeah, and not just like any graphics card. It's a 1070. Like, this isn't like a 1050 Ti or something. This is a GTX 1070 for $100 more than the Razer Core. Like, it's insane. Yeah, that's really exciting, especially like I don't really need it, but I'm still excited about it. But yeah, I imagine for you, Josh, like having something that's like doesn't weigh 10 times more than your MacBook, probably more than that in the case of the Razer Core, to be able to bump up the GPU power on your MacBook. I'm sure you're excited for that.
I am, and I'm happy that they've sort of, I won't say solved the problem, but they've demonstrated that, you know, I mean, because most GPU docks at this point have been at a certain size. That's kind of the first one that I would say is like compact enough where I could, like, you could reasonably see like throwing that in a carry-on or something like that and actually taking it with you and it not just living at your desk. I think the use case that a lot of manufacturers imagine to justify having it be as large as humanly possible is that, oh, well, someone wants this at home so that they have their computer and it's their laptop and it's their one computer, and they want a game at home on their big monitor, so they connect their big monitor and they hook their laptop to it and then they're done. And it's like, well, I mean, that might be one of the biggest use cases, but that, A, it's no excuse, and B, that's also not even strictly true for lots of different people for lots of different reasons. You know, the capability to have a optional graphics solution for a laptop that is upgradable, those two things, that's actually, that adds substantial utility to the laptop form factor that it could make the difference. I don't know if it'll make the difference in my case, but it could make the difference in many other people's sort of purchasing decisions as to whether or not they even need a desktop at all. Folks that are way more GPU bound in terms of the stuff they're doing and can appreciate A, the convenience of the portability of laptop, and B, the convenience of having everything on one machine rather than having to manage data movement across multiple machines. So I'm so happy that this exists now. I was kind of hoping maybe next year we would see size be the plan of attack, but the fact that GPU docks are something that everyone seems to be throwing their feather into, and the fact that we already have one that seems to be a lot more proportionately sized relative to what it's actually doing, is
because like you said, for traveling, it's basically about the same size as like a real thick hardcover book. So you think like some dedicated Lord of the Rings reader takes the compiled anthology on the flight. Like instead of that, you could have a dedicated GPU for your laptop. So real quick though, just before I forget, so we kind of threw a trick question at him because like we're looking at this thing and it's tiny, obviously, and it's got a 1070, so that's pretty impressive. You got this tiny dock with a 1070, and so like oh hey, when's the 1080 going to fit in there? It's like, oh yeah, that's soon. We're working on it. Oh, okay.
Interesting. Because they don't have any cards that would.
No, they don't. They don't have a ITX 1080 yet. So yeah.
They don't have one yet. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. All right. Well, I do have a few other things I want to talk about. But first, I want to take a brief break and get into something that folks that watched our coverage live in real time while we were on the ground may have noticed, which was that we actually had a sponsor for our coverage of Computex 2017, which was super exciting. So to that end, I just wanted to take a moment to extend our thanks to SilverStone, who elected with their sponsorship to have the focus be on their brand new Raven RVZ03 enclosure, which for those that don't know, it's a 14-liter enclosure, I believe. It's actually got a whole bunch of neat stuff packed into it. And yes, I know you guys are waiting with bated breath. It does indeed have RGB. Actually has controlled RGB. Although in SilverStone's defense, I think their implementation of it in this particular enclosure is a great working example of the right way to do RGB, which is to say, yes, it can be bright and flashy and whatever, but don't go overboard, A, and B, kind of do it in an understated way that complements a more kind of mature, in my opinion at least, but sophisticated design. So for those that have seen the Raven series of computers before, even with this RGB LED strip which graces the front of it, they did a good job of implementing it. In my opinion, it looks quite nice. And then as you turn into the internals, they're actually able to do a fair amount of hardware inside that 14-liter size. So for starters, it is either an MITX or mini DTX motherboard supported chassis. And they actually have a customized riser card to allow them to turn the graphics card to be parallel with the motherboard. And so that enables a sort of, it's almost like a home theater form factor, right? So kind of skinnier, flatter, but they also support standing it as well. So you have multiple arrangements for the enclosure, and they've kept all the venting on one side so that you can lay it flat or stand it up. In terms of hardware support, like I said, mini ITX or mini DTX for the motherboard, it supports pretty much any enthusiast-grade graphics card. They actually provided a lot of room for that. I think it's over 13 inches of length. You got two 2.5 drives supported in here. It supports a full ATX power supply, which I almost consider a con because they probably could have made it even smaller if they stuck with SFX or SFX-L. But for those that need it, or for those that want, say for instance, a fanless option to reduce noise, it supports that. And overall, it's a nice new addition to their product line. I think it looks quite nice. I think the hardware capability is quite good. We were able to see it in person while we were at Computex 2017, and overall, I think they did a nice job, especially given the sort of target demographic for it, which again is sort of those that are interested in that sort of hardware support in a home theater context. So if you'd like to learn more about the RVZ03, see pictures, dig into the technical specifications, or otherwise, we had banners up during Computex, which you could have clicked for more info. You can also just go to Silverstone's website directly. That's silverstonetech.com. That's spelled TEK, silverstonetech.com/Raven. And it'll be one of the first options at the top of that page. Plus, you can look at the rest of the Raven line. So our thanks again to Silverstone for sponsoring us in our coverage for Computex 2017. It was through that partnership, as well as through very helpful contributions by the small form factor community, that we were even able to go and have this podcast and do all of this cool stuff in the first place. So once again, our thanks to them.
Also to note, the link is in the description of the YouTube edition of this podcast.
Hashtag coordination. All right.
But so yeah, the RVZ03, I guess it's basically the same internals as the RVZ01E, just with the new, like it's not just like RGBs literally added to the RVZ01. It actually is a new different like faceplate. And actually, I think this isn't just like because there are corporate masters or anything. Like I really do think it looks pretty nice. I'm not the biggest fan of the RVZ01 layout because, like you said, the RVZ01E,
yes,
because it basically sacrificed the 3.5-inch drive mount to get ATX power supply instead of SFX.
Boo, ATX.
Yeah, but
so it's set.
Whatever. But yeah, I really do like actually, I think even if it didn't have RGBs, I think I like the way it looks better than the RVZ01.
Yep. I agree completely.
That it has RGBs is just a nice addition because I guess that's the one thing I really have to thank RGBs for, is that they've made kind of like a more minimalistic design with kind of a more muted color palette, like kind of the way to go, because you don't want to have like the rest of the design clash with the RGBs.
Correct.
That's a good point.
So you wouldn't want like a motherboard that's like really bright red, because maybe you want to have your RGB set to blue or something like that. So like black and silver and gray have kind of like taken over, and like I love that.
It is moderated design.
Yes. And so yeah, the RVZ03 I think does it really well. So
yeah, it's totally
I wouldn't mind RGB so much if they were like that. But a lot of, unfortunately, like it's much better at Computex this year than it was at like CES, or especially Computex last year. It's much more refined and elegant the way a lot of people did RGB, but there's still a lot of stuff we saw on the show floor that could use some redesigning for a more minimalistic approach. It was
the industry is much to work through. They're working through it slowly but surely.
Yeah, there'll be an article coming in the next couple of days about one particular manufacturer that hadn't quite solidified the RGB offerings.
Ooh, wait, which one is this? Because I can think of several.
It was a manufacturer whose RGB fan controller was not compatible with their RGB strips.
Then I know exactly who you're talking about, and I agree. Oh boy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyways, back to my highlights. 90% of which you guys have already talked about, and then I handed one to James because I'm stupid. So there are kind of two things I want to talk about, and honestly, half of the stuff really is less about the specific products and just some of the interactions we had. But to illustrate it, I wrote an article on this particular thing just because I thought it was interesting enough. But as you're walking through, I'll try and paint a picture for our listeners, especially for those that may have never been to a convention before. As you're walking through, a show floor, of which there are many, they do a pretty good job. It's a grid, and you have these kind of main walkways. They're a bit wider, and that's where all the big booths are, like the ones that take up the most space, literally, the largest manufacturers, people with the most money in the game, whatever. And then you go down these like alleyways that are less wide, and they have kind of smaller booths on that perimeter. And then you kind of go to the edges of the showroom floor, and those, even though actually they have the widest amount of space to walk across, those tend to be the least trafficked. It tends to be those kind of thoroughfares dividing the grid where most people are wandering. And that's where you see these much smaller booths by these smaller companies, which, you know, obviously aren't going to be as flashy and, oh, look, we built an entire house inside the showroom floor in 3 days sort of thing. But, you know, I think there was some deliberate effort on the part of all of us individually as well as organizationally to find some time to just wander through these and take a look at what some of these smaller manufacturers have. You know, in part just because you never know if someone's working on something that could be interesting until you uncover it for yourself, and it's a great opportunity to meet lots of these smaller and usually more local manufacturers. But B, also because in many respects, smaller manufacturers tend to do things that are more intrinsically interesting to begin with. There's definitely, you know, we were talking about this dynamic earlier when in the context of whether or not large companies should be culturally allowed to run Kickstarter campaigns, but there's definitely a moderation in terms of the risk profile of the products being made, and just where the focus is more generally towards the mainstream rather than kind of the enthusiast fringe when you look at these larger companies. And then when you look at smaller companies, oftentimes they're more likely to take more risks. Oftentimes they're more likely to try out new designs. Oftentimes they may just be focused in entirely different contexts, like industrial applications or retail applications.